Hold a man down till his breath ran out. My eyes can't take another black man down. While other blacks stand round, yelling, officer, stand down. Instead of putting hands down, y'all come on now. When the time gon' come for you to put fist up and give a black man pound, shoulder to shoulder, stand round and say, I dare y'all now.
If one fall, we all fall. If one call, we all call. You watching him take his last breath, but silence is death. That's on y'all. Stand round, stand proud, stand tall. No more victims in the shadows of the law. Hands up, fists tight, we brawl. Justice no big gift, we must take it all. Stand round, stand proud, stand tall.
Say it loud.
Black skin sacred, can't erase it all. Heart strong, so deep we crawl, but still we rise, we break that wall.
They say wait, be calm, be patient. But how many mothers gotta bury their baby? How many fathers gotta fake that strength when the world don't give them space to vent? I done seen dreams turn into chalk lines, seen a badge turn a man into a flat line, and we still post signs, still march streets. But how many protests today?
I just realized I've been talking for a minute and nobody even heard what I was saying because I was still on mute. So let's roll it back from the very beginning. If you would like to purchase a hat, this is what they look like. It'll be tagged under the video. Would appreciate the support if you're interested. Now, because I spent a minute in the beginning saying something that was completely unheard, I'm just going to get right into what it is that we're talking about this evening. So apparently, one Jeffrey Epstein penned a letter before he took his life while he was in prison to Larry Nassar. If you guys remember, Larry Nassar was the coach for the USA gymnastics team, right, that competed in the Olympics. I think he had Gabby Douglas on his team. I believe he had Simone Biles, was coached by him as well. But that gentleman was in prison, I believe since about 2019 as well, for assaulting people on the USA gymnastics team, young women. Jeffrey Epstein was also in prison in 2019 for basically the same thing. And as it's come out, as these Department of Justice documents are getting released, they're saying, oh, well, some of the things that the Department of Justice released is apparently a letter from Jeffrey Epstein to Larry Nassar. So we're going to get into exactly the content of those documents as being reported by CNN and Axios. But let's get right into it. And I'm going to grab my AirPods.
A lot of stuff in here that has been verified and has vindicated a lot of those victims.
All right, Marshal Cohen, thank you as always. I know you and the team had a lot of work going through these documents.
I want to bring in Nick Ackerman, former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor. He joins us by phone. So, Nick, a letter like that from Jeffrey Epstein in the days before he took his own life, Epstein, of course, who had a plea deal from years before and was accused of sexual abuse at the time he wrote it, a letter like that written to another sex abuser, does it have any legal significance?
My apologies. I still had it on 2x speed. I try to zoom through this stuff because there's so much content, but let's rewind that to the beginning.
A lot of
stuff in here that has been verified and has vindicated a lot of those victims.
All right, Marshal Cohen, thank you as always. I know you and the team have a lot of work going through these documents.
I want to bring in Nick Ackerman, former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor. He joins us by phone. So, Nick, a letter like that from Jeffrey Epstein in the days before he took his own life, Epstein, of course, who had a plea deal from years before and was accused of sexual abuse at the time he wrote it, a letter like that written to another sex abuser, does it have any legal significance?
Well, I don't know how much legal significance it has. It certainly corroborates what we've heard from other victims, that Donald Trump had an inclination to grab women and misuse his position in various ways before he became president.
Yeah, so that is something that we knew. And Trump said that. He said he grabs him by the coochie, essentially. But let's read this letter that Jeffrey Epstein allegedly penned to Larry Nassar, allegedly about Donald Trump. It says, when a young beauty walked by, he loved to grab snatch, whereas we ended up snatching grab in the mess halls of the system. Life is unfair. That is what Jeffrey Epstein had to say to Larry Nassar. Once again, as a reminder, both of these men, not gentlemen, they are not gentlemen in any sense of the word. Both of these men were in prison for assaulting young women. Both of these men were in prison for assaulting young women. And Jeffrey Epstein ends his letter saying, life is unfair. He thinks that it's unfair, the fact that he is in prison for the things that he's done. And this just goes to show, this is the same thing that's happened with Ghislaine Maxwell. She feels like her being in prison down in Florida, even being moved to this facility over in Texas, it's unfair. Like, they should just be able to have free reign over the entire world, be able to do whatever it is that they want, have no consequences, not be held accountable. And fortunately, they found out the hard way. That's not the way the world works. Jeffrey Epstein, for a long time, did get away with the things that he was doing. He got caught in 2008, 2009. They said he got some sort of sweetheart deal where he was on work release for 12 hours a day. He had basically private security with the guards that were watching him. This dude had free reign to do whatever he wanted to do. Got caught again a decade later. He's like, oh, it's so unfair that I don't get to do what I was doing and abusing folks, flying them to my island. That is the way that some rich people think in general. But this guy who assaulted young women is thinking. So he's like, I might as well just check out. I'm not having my way with the world anymore. I might as well just check out. All right, let's get back into this reporting.
And it's consistent with all these other people have said. And it's also consistent with Donald Trump's 50th birthday wish to Jeffrey Epstein. So whether or not this would be admissible in a court of law is a whole different story. But certainly from a political standpoint and from the fact that this is something that Jeffrey Epstein is saying, we know that they were very close and they're very good friends, and that this is pretty damning. To go on with this letter, it says in that letter, when a young beauty walked by, he loved to grab, snatch, whereas we ended up snatching grub in the mess halls of the system, meaning the prison system. And he signed it saying, life is unfair, yours, J. Epstein. So you've got two.
Now, it is important to remember that even though Trump is mentioned in these files and all of that, it's been repeated multiple times that he hasn't been accused or he hasn't been proven that he's assaulted anybody, right? The victims, they've said there's been multiple victims that said Trump didn't do anything. So that is of note. We don't know if Jeffrey Epstein had a vendetta against Trump that he wanted to settle the score in. I think it was last month, early in November, when some of the files came out. There was one that said he was like alluding to, I could ruin Trump, right? Then you had the one that said about, does Putin have the picture of him blowing Bubba? We don't necessarily know if that was Bill Clinton. People speculated it was Bill Clinton. But as far as what's being alleged or what's being said here by Jeffrey Epstein, we don't know that Trump was actually implicated and any wrongdoing in the files, right? That's important. That's one of the things that Donald Trump keeps saying. He keeps saying, oh, I don't want to release the files because I don't want to embarrass anybody, essentially. But we know that's against Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's bill. They don't care about anybody being embarrassed. They said, hey, if you're going to redact names, redact the victims' names. Don't redact anybody's name that could potentially be seen as a suspect. We know how that turned out on December 19th. They redacted 119 pages of, I think it was an interview or grand jury testimony, whatever it is. So the Department of Justice does not necessarily care about that, the Epstein Transparency Act, right? But I just wanted to remind people that even with this postcard or whatever, this letter that Jeffrey Epstein wrote to Larry Nassar, these two assaulters that seem to keep, Trump's name keeps appearing every time people talk about Jeffrey Epstein, including up until his passing. He said our president somewhere in this thing. But Trump has not been accused, right? All right, so let's move on. I want to show you guys the statement from the Department of Justice. So here we had some reporting over on Axios. It says the Justice Department on Tuesday said the letter in the trove of Epstein files addressed from Jeffrey Epstein to offender Larry Nassar is fake and that the handwriting does not appear to match Epstein's. Now they're forensic experts, right? At first, everything was a hoax. There was no credible evidence. There was nobody to charge. Now, even though they've released this file, they're going to come back and say, okay, well, it's fake. For a short time, the graphic letter appeared to be one of the strongest links yet between President Trump and Epstein, as it referred to, quote, our president, who was Donald Trump at the time. But the Justice Department says the FBI has confirmed the letter is not real. Though Trump is mentioned multiple times in Tuesday's batch of files, he has not been accused of any wrongdoing. The White House referred Axios to the Justice Department for comment. This is what I want to highlight. It says that the FBI confirmed that the letter is not real. We all know the job that the FBI has been doing over the past 11, 12 months. I don't know that there's too many people that are pleased with the FBI under the leadership of Kash Patel. I'm not going to say wholeheartedly that we can't take the FBI's word, but what I will say is the Trump administration and the people that are under this Trump regime make mistakes, say things that are untrue, and then they come back later and try to fix the narrative. So they can say that it's untrue now. They can say that we confirmed the letter is fake. It's not Jeffrey Epstein's handwriting. But they also said that that wasn't Donald Trump's signature on the birthday letter that went out to Epstein, right? How did that turn out? There were a bunch of people that were posting Trump's signature on postcards that he gave them and saying, hey, these signatures match. And we know the job that Kash Patel is doing. He fucked up on the Charlie Kirk assassination. He tweeted out early like, oh, we found somebody. He did that with Brown University. I believe he did it with Tyler Robinson was Charlie Kirk. But Kash Patel is not to be trusted. His leadership is not very good leading the FBI. So I'm not going to unanimously say like, okay, so the FBI said it, the Justice Department said it, case closed. Because every time they have their hands on something, case is not closed. Let's move on. So I want to show you guys this clip. This comes from when, what's his name? Kash Patel was testifying. He said, oh, well, there's no credible evidence that anything has gone on in the Epstein files, or we don't have any new information. Nobody is implicated. This is what I mean by you can't trust the word of Kash Patel and the FBI under his leadership, or the Department of Justice led by Pam Bondi, because these people are loyalists. These people are diehard MAGA loyalists, whether that is just because they're being opportunists or they really believe in the wizard. Maybe they really just believe in the wizard, and even pulling back the curtain is not enough for them. But check this out. So this is from Kash Patel's statement. It says, earlier this year, Kash Patel testified under oath that internal files contain no credible information Epstein trafficked young women to anyone other than himself. So here's the The words straight from Cash Patel's mouth.
Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one
For the information that we have
in the files.
in the case file.
I've actually been seeing this guy a lot. He's been going viral all over social media for all of his one-liners. This is not related to anything that's going on here, but I didn't know who this guy was. I keep seeing him go viral. Here's an email. It says, also Epstein bail argument is due to the judge on Thursday. The actual bail hearing will be Monday. This is Tuesday, July 9th, 2019. It says, of the 10 co-conspirators, 3 have been located in Florida and serve grand jury subpoenas. 1 in Boston, 1 in New York, 1 in Connecticut were located and served. 4 of the 10 are outstanding, with attempts having been made. 1 is a wealthy businessman in Ohio. A lead is being sent to CV. I don't know what that is. The remaining 3 are currently out of pocket. The team, 8 SA, TFO, 2 AUSAs, is flying out tonight/tomorrow to various locations in Florida to interview approximately 25 victims. It says the 1-800-CALL FBI line is up and running. We have received approximately 45 calls, which are in the process of vetting out. Let me know if you need anything else. The FBI, the Department of Justice, they have this email. This comes from the Department of Justice. This email here. This is what they released after they were compelled to by the Epstein Transparency Act, right? That took basically the first year of the Trump administration to even come out. So Pam Bondi has said there's no credible evidence. This gentleman, Cash Patel, has said there's no credible evidence. I think it's clear. I think it was already clear when this stuff was compelled to come out on December 19th and Dan Bongino decided that he was going to put in his 2 weeks starting on the 19th. It was already pretty evident that this stuff is going to be a freight train when it does come out. They're trying to see what they can get away with, right? Their release files on Friday the 19th. They released files today or yesterday. They're slowly piecemealing files in order to see, like, hey, what's the temperature out in the streets? Are people paying attention to this? And unfortunately for them, like, it's not going away. This story or this situation has been propped up by MAGA first. And then once people in the U.S. became aware of it, more and more people started having their eyes on this. They said, okay, release the files, right? The most transparent administration, that's what Trump said that they were going to be. They're not being very forthcoming. They're not being transparent. You have to twist their arms to get information. When you do get information, they're going to lie and say that your eyes are deceiving you. This is what the people on the right voted in. This is what the people on the right voted in. And if I'm being completely honest with you, there was a point when I was going to vote for Trump. And seeing how they've just fucked it up this past 12 months, I'm glad to say that I did not, thankfully. I voted for Biden. I had to wear that, but I didn't vote for Trump. So a point for me, a point for Gryffindor. All right, let's go back to this article. It says Larry Nassar, the former doctor for USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University, was sentenced to 40 to 175 years in 2018 after 160 women. They said that the entire Epstein ring was about 1,000 young women. So they're trying to pretend like, oh, the victims don't matter. We're not going to hear from the victims. President Trump didn't have the victims at the White House when he signed the Epstein Transparency Act. Nobody from Trump's administration is looking to interview these women, to speak with them, to give them any sort of platform, right? Like I said, the Trump administration's arm was basically twisted into putting this information out. They didn't want to have this out. They were looking for any reason to brush past this. it was reported, oh, well, when they put out these documents on Friday, the 19th, these documents didn't even have Trump's name in them, right? There was a bunch of pictures. One of the pictures ended up getting pulled because it had Trump in it. Then they put it back once people noticed. I don't know if you guys know that. We're tracking that, but that's suspicious, right? It says, as you know, this is from the letter that Epstein sent to Nassar. So it says, our president also shared, we already talked about this part up here, so we're not going to get into that. But it says, our president also shares our love of young nubile women. A young beauty walked by, yeah. This is what these gentlemen were talking about. Open and freely discussing this as if you're not convicted. Well, he wasn't convicted. He ended up as if you were not charged for these crimes, right? Took himself out before he had to go to trial because you don't want to stand trial. If you believe, like he said at the end, life is unfair. If you feel like, there's no way out for you anymore, like you've been backed into a corner, there's no way out, you're not getting a fair shake because you're being held accountable for the thing that you did, and you just check out, that's your character. That's Epstein's character. The letter was postmarked to in Northern Virginia 3 days after Epstein's death, the Justice Department said. Epstein died in a New York federal prison while awaiting trial for his charges. So one of the things that, that is interesting. Why is this postmarked after his passing? Epstein wrote the letter. Well, in that CNN video that we did at the top of this, they were discussing how, sometimes the mail is going to be held. So yes, Epstein said in this thing, basically that he was ready to check out, right? He said he was ready to check out. And obviously he did. Allegedly he did. And then this letter came out. Or this letter made it through the post at the prison, wherever he was. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't written by him. Like we said, we can't necessarily trust the FBI. We know the job that they're doing, the bang up job that they're doing, catching all of these criminals and the phenomenal work that's happening under Kash Patel. So there we go. I think I have one more thing. What is this? Oh, here we go. Let's check this out from MS Now.
Today, for instance, we learned that during Trump's first term, this is back in January.
I really have a affliction with putting things on 2 times speed. But here we go. Let's try this again.
January 2020, an assistant U.S. attorney wrote an internal email about a review of flight records as part of the government's case against Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, who has subsequently been transferred to a low-security prison after talking to Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche. And this is what...
Do you know how crazy that is? Somebody that is accused of what Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are accused of. The president's ex-personal lawyer, deputy director, deputy, whatever the title is, he's second in command over at the Department of Justice. Then he just comes down like, hey, let's have a conversation about what may or may not be in these files, whatever you can provide the government. And then she gets moved to a cushy, by all reports, facility over in Texas. I think I saw something where it said like she's doing some rehabilitation program where she has a dog. Like, come on. I'm not saying that prison needs to be a place to torture people. I'm not saying that at all. I think that, when I watch these shows like 60 Days In and stuff, these facilities are dirty. They're nasty. We absolutely need to probably, whether it be the state or the federal, whoever is responsible for it, needs to invest in some money in modernizing these facilities, making them clean, because we're not necessarily here to torture people, right? We're trying to reintegrate them into society if they're going to come back into society. But to move somebody from the facility that they were at to a minimum security prison based on what she is charged with, no can do. So
The email says, for your situational awareness, wanted to let you know that the flight records we received yesterday reflect that Donald Trump traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported or that we were aware. including during the period we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case, the email states. In other words, during a period in which crimes were being committed. The email added that Trump had been on at least 8 Epstein flights. On one flight in 1993, he and Epstein are the only 2 listed passengers. On another, the only 3 passengers are Epstein, Trump, and then 20-year-old redacted. That seems like a justified redaction there. Remember what Trump said last year on social media, quote, "I was never on Epstein's plane or at his stupid island"?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. This, I feel like, is a little bit of dishonest reporting. And I'm going to tell you where I agree and I'm going to tell you where I disagree. They said, okay, back in the 90s, 93, it was Trump and Epstein on the plane alone. Not necessarily saying that anything happened, right? Whether, I don't even know if he had the island back then, Little St. James. They said that he was on the plane alone with Epstein back in 93. Okay, no problem. They said that there was another instance where he was on the plane and there was 3 of them, Epstein, Trump, and a 20-year-old whose name is redacted. Obviously don't want to expose that person because they probably don't want anything to do with this situation. You know, I don't feel like there's anything implicating Trump in any wrongdoing there. So just the fact that, you know, you can report on it or talk about it or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump was involved in whatever Epstein had going on. It doesn't mean that Trump knew. They have a friendship that's been reported. That's not a secret thing. Nobody is confused about the fact that these guys hung around each other. Now, what is important though, is when you say, hey, I was never on his plane or I never, you know, had this type of relationship with him. When Trump keeps trying to downplay his relationship, now that is important. It is important because repeatedly we see time after time after time, people that may or may not have been associated with Epstein or people that say they were not associated with Epstein, the files tell an entirely different story. Steve Bannon had this documentary, these recordings that he did with Epstein that he never put out. And he kind of tried to downplay it as if this was some sort of like professional relationship when, you know, based on the emails, allegedly they had a closer relationship than Steve Bannon alluded to, right? So it is important to find out in these files the context of people's relationship with Epstein, when they communicated with him, how long they communicated with him, what those communications were about. So I do feel like it's a little disingenuous to just say, oh, well, he was on the plane, he was doing it. Like, okay, the context of that is what's important, not just the fact that he was there. So
that appears to be patently false, right? We also learned over the weekend that Epstein had 10 alleged co-conspirators. This is probably the biggest piece of news to come out of these documents today. So in another email, this one from 2019, the day after Jeffrey Epstein was charged with child sex trafficking by the feds, an FBI employee asked a colleague for, quote, an update on the status of the 10 co-conspirators. Now, this email also shows the incompetent or possibly malign nature of DOJ's redaction efforts, or at least as yet unexplained. Some of the co-conspirator names were redacted, and that would appear to be a violation of the law under almost all circumstances. You can't redact someone's name just because they might suffer embarrassment or reputational harm, even though Donald Trump thinks you should. The law explicitly says you can't. But then, in the same document, some names aren't redacted at all. As Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said in a statement today, the Department of Justice needs to shed more light on who was on the list, how they were involved, and why they chose not to prosecute.
absolutely, 100%. You can't just go start redacting people's names as the law says because you don't want to cause them embarrassment. People need to be not necessarily outed, but we need to know the context of your relationships. It doesn't matter if it's the president. It doesn't matter if it's Steve Bannon. It doesn't matter who it is. If it's Larry Nassar trading letters back and forth with Epstein, right? Or did they just write one letter? Did Epstein just write this one letter addressed to Larry Nassar and then check out? We don't know at this time, right? But there are more documents to be released. Let's go ahead and move on. So the talk of the town right now has been a 60-minute 60 Minutes interview that was supposed to air, but it looks like it got pulled because there was not favorable reporting to the Trump administration. So from what I understand, this 60 Minutes episode was about CCOT. CCOT is the supermax prison down in El Salvador with President Bukele. So a couple of years ago, maybe let's say 5 years ago, Bukele decided, hey, in order to clean up El Salvador, in order to turn our society around, we're going to start locking up gang members. So that's what they did. They started going after people that they consider violent, people they consider gang members or cartel members, and they put them in prison. They put them in a supermax prison with bunk beds that stack damn near up to the ceiling. Let's say it's 60 to 100 people in there. If you've been in the military, you know what it's like living in a bay with, 30 to 60 people. But instead of it being 2-man beds where they're spread out across an entire floor, these gentlemen are locked in a cell. They doesn't seem to have any rec room. They're just piled up in beds all the way up to the ceiling, damn near like Squid Game. I don't know if over in El Salvador they got the inspiration from watching Squid Game, seeing the brutality that was going on over there. But these gentlemen that are in CCOT are stacked up just like that. So let me go ahead and show you. Here we go. So this is Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem is standing in front of one of these gates where it's stacked up with all of these guys sitting on what's essentially a bunk bed. It looks metal. Doesn't look like there's any sort of padding on the bed or, this is how they're living. They're living literally caged up like zoo animals. So the episode from 60 Minutes was supposed to be about the conditions here, about people that were Venezuelan immigrants or migrants that were shipped over to CCOT. I believe some of them eventually ended up getting released, but the episode got pulled. So this is what CCOT looks like, right? This is how people are being inhumanely treated. I know there's going to be a lot of people that say, oh, well, these are criminals. These are gang members. Yes, I'm inclined to agree with you. They are criminals. They are gang members. And whether it be El Salvador society or our society here, we don't want people that are a danger to the majority of us, the few that are a danger to the majority of us, to be able to run rampant and do whatever the hell they want to do. I agree with you. Now, this is El Salvador, right? So I'm not necessarily interested in telling them how or how not to run their country. But for the United States, I would assume that we have morals, principles, and values that are not necessarily in line with treating people like this. We put people in solitary confinement. We have people that are separated from the people that are separated from society, right? They have what they call the SHU, the special housing unit, to separate people that just can't conform in like general population or whatever. So I'm not necessarily saying that there isn't a place for prison. I'm not saying there isn't a place for separating dangerous and violent people from the rest of society. I don't want my neighborhood brutalized. I don't want to be brutalized. I don't want my neighbors brutalized. I don't want anybody to suffer anything that I wouldn't want for myself. So that's where I stand on the entire prison thing. But shipping people out here, providing prisoners to CCOT, not really something I'm comfortable with. But this is what we did. And for the record, we're also paying El Salvador to house these folks. So just keep in mind that your tax dollars, if you believe in prison, but you don't believe in torturing people, this is what your tax dollars are helping to fund. All of these gentlemen are not from the Trump administration deporting people over there, sending them to the super max, but these people are there. This is where they sent Kilmar Abrego Garcia after they were told not to send him over there. So just remember that. All right, so let me show you. Let me see. So this is in response to this. I don't know if this is necessarily in response to the CBS 60 Minutes interview being pulled, but I want you to listen to what it is that this gentleman says. I think it's kind of in the latter half. In the beginning of this, he kind of mentions a bunch of different media companies, but I want you to take a listen to this.
auctioning off the United States' First Amendment to a wannabe tyrant. We have to ask ourselves that if Watergate happened today, would our biggest news outlets be allowed to run the story? Or would a billionaire owner decide that crossing the administration just isn't worth it for his bottom line?
That's an important question. Would a wealthy billionaire that owns a media outlet, would they report on the things that are egregious that the Trump presidency is doing, right? Or do they want to curry favor with the Trump presidency? What is more important? Getting the truth out there, reporting the news, right? What I do on this channel is not news. I'm giving you guys my opinion on what is being reported in the news based on my knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the world, right? My perspective of the world. But news is supposed, the most you could hope for is that they're not going to be biased, that they're going to report facts. But we know that that's not the case. A lot of these news outlets, they do opinion pieces as well. They just have entire conglomerates that uphold what it is that they report on. And that's what we rely on to find out what's going on in the world. And is it okay if they start pulling their punches because they want to be favorable to a president or they want to not show their political party in a bad light? It's going to get a no from me. I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I don't know what was in the 60-minute interview, in the 60-minute segment, but the reason that was pulled, I guess she's the head producer or executive, whatever her title is, Barry Weiss over at CBS, who, 60 Minutes is under her umbrella. She's like, okay, well, we didn't get any comments from the Trump administration. There were 3 comments provided. We didn't get any comments, or the comments that they made were not included. So we're not going to run this episode. It's going to come out at a later date. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's untrue, but the stuff that's happening over at CCOT is important. The fact that we're participating in it, that we're sending people over there, that we're helping fund it, not entirely, but we are sending taxpayer money over there. So when I go to work and let's say it's 2% of my paycheck, whatever it is, 2% of my work every day, whatever number that counts out to be, that's what's going to CCOT to help fund that prison over there. That may be where we got the idea for facilities like Alligator Alcatraz over in Florida. Something I'm not okay with. I do believe that people that are in this country illegally can't stay here. You can't stay here. I'm not talking about people that have been here, for decades. They're working, they're making a life here. They've been a contribution to society. I'm talking about people that have crossed in the past couple of years. Yes, they may be fleeing whatever situation that they had going on in their life. But at the end of the day, if your house isn't fixed, you can't invite more people to live there. So that's how I feel on immigration. I'm just giving you guys all of my thoughts today. So while I feel that way about immigration, while I feel that way about prison, I'm not okay with funding this type of stuff. I'm not okay with subjecting people to this type of cruelty. In my opinion, right, it's cruelty. There's going to be some people out there to say, no, these are criminals. It doesn't matter if you jaywalk or if you are a member of a cartel. You deserve to be in CCOT. I think that we have a lot more moral clarity than sending people that have crossed the border here to have a better life for them and their family because of something that's happening over in their country. I think we have a little bit more moral clarity and empathy than saying that that is the correct thing to do. And I think that the reason the Trump administration might not like the reporting on this or the way that this paints them in the light is because as they started ramping up this mass immigration program that they're trying to do, they're finding out that people are not as cruel as they were hoping that they were. The Trump administration, they ran on all of this different stuff that is not turning out the exact way that they pictured it. And this mass immigration thing is one of them. People see that, ICE is going into neighborhoods and all of these different federal agencies are going into neighborhoods. They see the National Guard being deployed and they're like, hey, I do want people out of the country. I do disagree with mass immigration. I do disagree with mass immigration. I do agree with mass deportation. But they also look at the Trump administration, see what they're doing, and say, okay, this is a little heavy-handed. So I don't know how many people would look at CCOT, get accurate reporting on it, get a big story on it, and say, okay, I'm perfectly fine with this. I'm perfectly fine with grandmas and grandpas and nephews and whoever is being deported over there, whoever's been deported over there. Unless they're a violent criminal, there's not a lot of people that are going to be okay with that. And from what I understand, from what I've read, about 3% of the people that have been sent there are actual violent criminals that have engaged in some sort of egregious violent crime, right? So hopefully this episode does come out. Hopefully we get a little more context behind what's in it and the reasoning, but this is where we are. I think I have one more thing to show you guys. Okay, here we go. This is Carolyn Levitt saying these are heinous monsters. These people that were shipped over to CCOT, they're heinous monsters. Now, the women over on the I Had It podcast call her Carolyn something, whatever they called her. Basically, she's a liar. She's a propagandist. And, she's the mouthpiece for the Trump administration in terms of releasing information out to the press. So she's going to spin it every time in every way that paints them positively. She doesn't want, just like, Karine Jean-Pierre, she doesn't want the Trump administration to be looked at in a bad light, right? So she's got to spin the narrative. This is her brief comments about the people that were shipped over to CCOT.
Are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
The U.S. government said these people are the worst of the worst.
These people are migrants. And the sad reality is that the U.S. government tried to make an example out of them. They sent them to a place where they were likely to be tortured, to send migrants across Latin America the message that they should not come to the United States.
Juan Papier is a deputy director at the nonprofit Human Rights Watch. In an 81-page report released in November, the organization concluded there was systematic torture and other abuses at CCOT, and that nearly half of the Venezuelans the U.S. sent there had no criminal history.
The information we obtained.
Check that out. No criminal history. Nearly half, 48.8%, had no criminal history. Like we said, you can say it's a crime to come into the country. I believe that it is. I believe that you need to be removed. But I don't think we need to be so heavy-handed that we're sending you to basically hell, right? Hell on earth. That's what CCOT is. President Bukele said, hey, once you're in this facility, you're never going to see the light of day, essentially. That's what's going on over there. And if you think that that is the place for people just because they cross the border, which is a crime, they do need to go home, right? Then I don't necessarily know that everything in your head is working quite correctly. So 50%, no crime at all. About 3%, what I've seen reported on from other places, have actually been violent criminals.
In the United States is based on data provided by ICE.
So ICE's own records said?
ICE's own records say that only 3% of them had been sentenced for a violent or potentially violent crime.
Well, there you go. 3 from ICE themselves. About 3% for violent crime. So you guys can let me know what you think. I think this is heavy-handed. I think that I would have been interested in seeing what's going on over in CCOT. I did see a documentary or some reporting about it early into the Trump administration. And when I was in the military many moons ago, not that many moons ago, but years ago, I did have a soldier. He is from El Salvador. He's from El Salvador. He travels back home. And there was a time when I asked him, like, hey, I'm just traveling. I've been a few places. I'd asked him if I could go to El Salvador with him, not really knowing too much about the country, but wanted to go someplace new. And he's like, actually, even when I go home, I don't leave my family's area. Like he said, he doesn't go outside. Basically, he doesn't go outside of his home, right? this was when we initially had the conversation. And then, you know, some time passes. He tells me about what's going on here. And then he tells me like, hey, you know, it's a lot safer. I believe that El Salvador is, you know, they have more of a tourist, an economy that's more attractive to tourists now that they've implemented this. So like I said, I'm not telling them how to run their country, but what I'm saying is we can't participate in this. As the United States, if we're supposed to be leaders on the world stage, you know, people can say we're not, people can say we are. If we're supposed to be leaders on the world stage, we can't have our hand in doing stuff like this. It's contradictory to what we say our values are. But, you know, you guys tell me what you think. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Let me take a break. We'll be right back.
You're asking me to stand down while people just stand around. Recording policemen, hold a man down till his breath ran out. My eyes can't take another black man down while other blacks stand round, yelling, officer, stand down. Instead of putting hands down, y'all come on now. When the time gon' come for you to put fist up and give a black man pound, shoulder to shoulder, stand round and say, I dare y'all now.
If one fall, we all fall. If one call, we all call. You watching him take his last breath, but silence is death. That's on y'all. Stand round, stand proud, stand tall. No more victims in the shadows of the law. Hands up, fist tight, we brawl. Justice no big gift, we must take it all. Stand round, stand proud, stand tall.
Say it loud.
Black skin sacred, can't erase it all. Heart strong, so deep we crawl, but still we rise, we break that wall.
They say wait, be calm, be patient.
All right, then we're back. So let's talk about this thing real quick. So while I was scrolling on Twitter, I came across this video from Ro Khanna. If you don't remember who Ro Khanna is, he is the gentleman that co-sponsored the bill for the Epstein, what is it? Epstein Transparency Act, right? Ended up getting signed. They were supposed to release the files. Didn't happen, but that's not what this is about. We already talked about Epstein. We're not going to deep dive into that. This clip says, from Ro Khanna, pasted on his X page, says, it's not just about mouthing the words affordability. We need, and then he lists all these things. Billionaire taxes, $10 a day, childcare, Medicare for all, a living wage, stop Wall Street from buying homes, free public college and trade schools. So let's go ahead and check this out. You know, right on the face of this, I kind of agree. I'm not necessarily saying that all of these things I agree with, but the fact that it's not just about saying affordability. It's not just about preaching a message to get you elected. It's about actually doing the thing that you were elected to do, which is, you know, if Ro Khanna's in the House, representing your constituents. Everybody that is elected into a public office, your one job is to represent the people that you were elected to represent. It's not to serve your own interests. It's not to make yourself rich. Public service is service, which means you have a client, which is the people of the United States en masse, not, you know, a couple of big rich billionaires. It's not specifically Elon Musk. It's not specifically Mark Zuckerberg. It's not oil CEOs, tech CEOs. Those people are in our society. Their interests do need to be represented, but they're not the only people. This one person, they're going to pass one day. Their singular interests are not necessarily for the good of the entire population. There's 370 million of us. So the people that are elected into office, what they need to do is represent us, not just those people that have an extraordinary amount of resources. But this is Ro Khanna's time to talk. So let's see what he has to say.
And this affordability agenda, it's a real challenge to Republicans, to President Trump himself, but it's also a challenge to many Democrats. For example, the Democratic leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who never endorsed Zohran Mamdani. What is your message to Democrats across the country as a former head of...
I think Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, both of them are haters. I think it's time to sunset both of their political careers, because if people are going to hold office, but they're not looking for new, fresh ideas, new, fresh faces to bring like lifeblood into the party, especially when the Democratic Party was on life support for the past couple of years, then maybe your time has dwindled. Maybe your time is sunset. Maybe it's time for you to go do something else. Maybe you can be an advisor to the people that are coming in or whatever. But if you're not ready to stand up and fight and represent the interests of the people of the United States in your party, you probably need to go, because politics is not the go along to get along career. Politics is, hey, this is what needs to be done, and we're going to fight tooth and nail, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of if you like it. This is what the people that I represent need and want, and this is the agenda that we're going to push. That doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily get everything that you want, but you need to be missing some teeth and have some bruises when you get finished fighting for it. Maybe you give the other person a little bit more, metaphorical bruises, not actual bruises, unless, you want to take something outside and move some furniture. But you need to give metaphorical bruises and batter these people up politically in order to push for what it is that your constituents wants. And if you're not going to do that, then by all means, get the fuck out the way.
Of what the campaign of Bernie Sanders, who very much endorses Mamdani.
Well, my message to Chuck Schumer was step down as minority leader. You're out of touch with the Democratic base. But my broader message is you cannot have a group of elites who are piling up wealth. In my district in Silicon Valley, $18 trillion of wealth. Amy, 1/3 of the entire national stock market is in my district. We need to tax billionaires. We need to tax that wealth. We need to have Medicare for all. We need to have $10 a day child care. We need to stop Wall Street from buying single-family homes. We need a living wage. We need free public college and free trade schools. We need a Marshall Plan for America's economic development. It's not just about mouthing the words affordability. It's about changing an economic system that has accumulated wealth in the hands of a few and abandoned working and middle-class Americans across this country. I believe that we need an FDR-like, bold, progressive economic agenda. I call it new economic patriotism. But people like Zoran, people like Bernie Sanders, others, Greg Kazar, Pramila Jayapal, many of us are working towards that for a Democratic Party that is actually going to live up to those ideals.
See, this is one of the reasons I like this new age of Democrats. I think that they are the children of Bernie Sanders. If I'm being completely honest, they've come from what I know to be like his ideology. And there are some people that are pushing it too far, right? There's some people that are doing things that I don't necessarily think we're going to get all of them. Namely, Zohran Mamdani, right? I've talked about him ad nauseum. I'm not going to get into his specific policies. He's going to take office in January. We're going to find out what he does over in New York, if the people of New York get what they bargained for, right? Or do they get a lot of pushback? Are things being held up? But I like this thing that this new wave of Democrats are doing, where they're calling people out by name. They're saying, hey, you're not doing the job. You're not doing enough. You're not representing what you said that you represented. It's time for you to step down. We had the incident where Zohran Mamdani was standing next to Trump. He was asked, hey, is this person the fascist? You've said that before. He looked at Trump and said, and Trump said, go ahead, just say, yeah, it's okay. And he did. And he repeated it in the interview. You had this situation with Ro Khanna where you've seen other people ask, hey, does Chuck Schumer need to step down? And sometimes people kind of like dodge the question. They don't necessarily want to answer it. Ro Khanna says, yes, he's not doing the job that he needs to do. He needs to step down. Now, let's talk about taxing billionaires. These people have an extraordinary amount of money, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you provide something for society, you deserve to get compensated for that, a fair compensation. Where I have an issue is how the money is being spent, right? Elon Musk, the richest man in the United States, maybe in the entire world, is looking to have $1 trillion at some point. I think he just crossed 600 billion. extraordinary amount of money. Congratulations to him, right? People buying his products, or he owns the company. People are interested. People are investing. You know, that's not his fault that people are backing his moves and he's allowed to accumulate all of this money. But when he tried to go implement Doge, took a look at the system 5 months and said, no, I'm out of here. What kind of society do we live in where the Pentagon repeatedly fails audits? I think they said something like $1.4 trillion is unaccounted for directly to the Pentagon's budget. We have a guy that's about to be a trillionaire, well on his way. 600 billion, he just crossed the threshold. And we're out here essentially begging our government to focus on us. It's ridiculous. And we need people that are going to speak truth to power. Zohran Mamdani, Ro Khanna, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who decided that she wasn't going to continue after January 5th. Rand Paul, I really like Rand Paul as well. We need more people like this. Graham Plattner, I'm liking Graham Plattner as well. We need more people like this that are saying, hey, these are my principles and I'm going to stand on them regardless of who's in the office, regardless of how other people feel about it. And what you're going to see is when you stand on principles and you're not doing this trendy thing where you're trying to trick people into thinking that you're about one thing, but you really stand for another thing, you're going to see people gravitate towards the authenticity. And that's what Ro Khanna is talking about. It's not just about being a mouthpiece and saying, oh, affordability, or we need to lower housing prices. What are you actually going to do in order to help sustain the next generation, help prepare the next generation to assume their role in society? Because if we are going to be a society, if we are going to have a functioning society into the future, people have to have a stake in the game, right? I always tell my wife, the smallest building block is family, then it goes community, then it goes your city, your state, and then the nation as a whole, right? So if people can't even afford to have a family, then they have no buy-in into society. So it's not just about saying the words affordability and then going to do something to enrich yourself in Congress or enrich CEOs or billionaires that already have an exorbitant amount of money, right? Like I said, I'm not saying that those people shouldn't exist, but what about helping the people that are the least of us, right? What about helping lower middle class, upper middle class? What about helping people that are not just the billionaire class at all, right? I want to play this thing. I played this the other day, but I want to show you guys again. I actually pulled a different video. In relation to this, there was a video about Zohran Mamdani maybe a week ago. He was meeting for 12 hours. He met with 140 people across New York City and just said, tell me what your ideas are. You know, I'm about to sue in this office. I'm young. I don't know everything. This is what Zohran Mamdani said. Not verbatim, but the sentiment. I don't know everything. Tell me what you think needs to happen in the city. Let me walk a mile in your shoes for the next 5 minutes. And he had conversations with all of these people. He ran on this thing of affordability. He said, hey, I may not be able to fix everything, but the small amount of power that I do have in this big city that houses 8 million people, let me see what I can do to make your lives better. And that's what we need. We don't need just a mouthpiece that's going out there repeating the phrase affordability. We need people that are going out, that are looking at the landscape and interacting with the people at the bottom of the totem pole. Us, me included, interact with us at the bottom of the totem pole, find out what our issues are, find out what assistance we need, and put our tax dollars to work. Or else this thing doesn't work. This project doesn't work, right? We're going on 250 years. We're reaching a level of maturity in our economy and in our society where the older we get, the more optimized we get, the less the system works for more people. You would think that, like, as time goes on, the system works for more people are able to buy in and benefit from it. But that's not the case. We have stuff like AI that's taking over jobs and putting people out of work. The job market is tight. People can't transition. You have people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk and Donald Trump telling us basically, like, you know, if you're out of work, you don't even have the skills to go into these new jobs. We need foreigners. We need H-1B visa workers. That's what they think of our society. That's what they think of the education system, that they have been, either they came through the education system, or like Donald Trump, he's trying to get rid of the education system with no plan to with how to shift people. But anyway, let's check out this thing from Zohran Mamdani before we get out of here. This is an interview that he did with Trevor Noah.
It feels like New York has, like many cities in the world, fallen into the trap of fixing what needs to be fixed for the wealthy, and then sort of ignoring or pushing aside the problems that affect the poor.
I mean, I think about when you fly.
Yeah.
We have made it such a difficult experience to go through TSA that there's now a financial incentive to sign up for a separate program that can move you through it quicker.
Yeah.
I mean, we have monetized the dysfunction of flying.
Do you think that's by design, though?
I'm going to leave that to you and Dave, man.
Yeah, convenience is up for sale. Absolutely.
I mean,
convenience has been up for sale for the longest time.
But it's absurd to me that you should have to pay for the experience that you should already be getting. You're already paid.
It feels like New York.
That's funny. I didn't know what this entire clip was about, but it kind of reminded me of this thing that's going on with these Trump cards, these Trump gold cards, right? How if you pay I think it was $10,000 or $15,000, and then you pay for the application fee that's not refundable, and then you pay the $1 million or $5 million that they can't necessarily pin down and decide what it is that they want to charge people. But if you pay that, then you get to get expedited through the visa line. Where I'm like, okay, if you have the money, if you can expedite the process if people pay, then why don't we just expedite the process? If we can do it, if somebody gives over some money, that which they can't give like directly, it'd be different. Like if it was a company, it was a private company, and you're saying, okay, well, I'm gonna prioritize the people that pay more. That's one thing. But the government should not operate that way. The government should not say, hey, if you give me more money, you're going to get preferential treatment. So I see that as a tie-in to what Zohran Mamdani is saying. Let's not throw some money to incentivize the dysfunctional system, whether it be TSA or whether it be this Trump gold cards, which I think are a terrible idea. But if you're going to throw this option on the table, let's just fix the system that is keep creating such a bottleneck and getting people through. That's been the conversation for today. You guys let me know what you think. If you have any suggestions for me, right? I'm trying to grow. I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to bring a better product every time that I get on a mic. I share my ideas. So if there's something that you didn't like in the episode, there's something you think I could have done better, or there's something that in here that you did like, let me know. Until next time, happy holidays. I don't know if I'm going to be on tomorrow or Christmas, but if I don't see you, happy holidays. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have some time off. Hope you kick your feet up, and I hope whoever's in your life rubs your feet with some nice oil. No Diddy oil though. Peace.